2 years later, patience exhausted, the second anniversary of the downing of Flight PS752. The downing of Flight PS752 represents yet another link in the chain of crimes victimizing the Iranian people. 176 innocent lives were lost on the cold morning of January 8, 2020. In an unprecedented example of state crimes, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard's air defense units targeted Ukrainian flight PS752 with multiple Taurus-1 missiles. Despite the flight crew's desperate attempt to save their passengers, the aircraft crashed to the ground only 6 minutes and 42 seconds after takeoff from Tehran's international airport. The doomed destiny of flight PS752 posed a serious challenge to a world mired by terrorism, authoritarianism, and international realpolitics. A challenge that must be held up to the free world, and this time the responsibility has fallen on the shoulders of hundreds of mourning family members who lost their loved ones. The Islamic Republic of Iran's history speaks for itself. Arbitrary executions, mass assassinations of dissenters, artists, activists, intellectuals, scientists, and journalists. This trail of blood reaches beyond Iran's borders, with hundreds of state-sponsored abductions and assassinations on foreign soil. Many of these cases were lost in the legal maze, and some that found their day in court fell short of holding accountable those who were behind such heinous acts. Within hours of the downing of Flight PS752, the Iranian government set in motion a machinery of deceit, lies, and distortions. The crash site was allowed to be looted and vandalized. Personal devices were deliberately tampered with, and many were damaged. Within 5 hours, the crash site was cleared by bulldozers, and all evidence was destroyed. For 3 days, their official narrative was that Flight PS752 crashed due to technical failures. Only under international pressure, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards of Iran admitted to the shooting, but they refused to act in accordance with international regulations. While the Iranian government was holding the black boxes hostage for 7 months, Iran's security apparatus was busy persecuting, harassing, threatening, and imprisoning witnesses and protesters, in some cases even physically torturing family members. A Human Rights Watch report raised major concerns highlighting the Iranian government's inhumane actions. The world faced an absurd situation where the very perpetrators of a crime were given the responsibility to investigate their own crime. Within months of the downing, the families formed an association, and they embarked on the long and arduous road to justice, a road without a roadmap. A year later, Flight PS752 represented an open wound in the sky. On the first anniversary, the association became a haven of support for the families. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, husbands and wives, cousins, friends, and colleagues of the victims took solace in the community that formed around the association. The second year represented an even steeper road ahead for justice and restitution. Mr. Ralph Goodale, Canada's special advisor to the Prime Minister, published his responding report that highlighted numerous unanswered questions and emphasized the inadequacies of Iran's initial reports. Mr. Goodale later remarked that Iran's final report was shambolic. After many attempts to connect directly, the association finally met with the president of IKO. In this meeting, the families expressed their deep concerns. Instead, the IKO and its members remained passive while the Iranian government breached every obligation it had under the convention to which they are signatories. The association held online meetings with Ukrainian Foreign and Justice Ministry officials and learned that Ukraine is in dire need of concrete cooperation from Canada, especially its federal police agency, the RCMP. The RCMP refused to initiate criminal proceedings in Canada, and cooperation with their Ukrainian counterparts was distant and glacial at best. On January 11th of the second year, Canada's foreign minister left office in a cabinet shuffle. The families lost an ardent supporter and champion for their cause in the government. On February 2021, Dr. Calamard, the UN rapporteur, published an extensive report on her findings. The Iranian government published its final report in March 2021. It was no more than an attempt to whitewash their crime and shield their high-ranking military and political officials. Canada's Transportation Safety Board's director, Ms. Kathy Fox, held a press conference that merely emphasized the lack of access to relevant information to make any meaningful conclusions. In March 2021, some of the victims' mothers held a protest in Iran under intense pressure by the Iranian security forces. By June 2021, the International Coordination and Response Group of affected countries issued their notice of claim to the Iranian government. This has been ignored even as we mark the second anniversary today. Canada's forensic team published a report in response to the Islamic Republic's final report. The contradictory conclusions in Canada's report were disappointing to the families. In June 2021, the association held a protest rally at the IKO headquarters in Montreal to voice their frustrations with the process and emphasize IKO's role in their plight. Despite advance notice and invitations, the families were greeted with closed doors at IKO offices. The IKO officials made no effort to meet the rally participants. While the association and its members were grappling with the official dynamics of their cause, the victims' family members were struggling to cope with their loss, grief, and lack of hope for justice. Patience is only a virtue if it fuels achievement, and well into the second year, the families remain distraught with the results. Since the downing of Flight PS752, many agencies within the Canadian government acted swiftly and compassionately. The Prime Minister appointed a task force within hours of the crash, and government officials were dispatched to help the families. Financial aid, special consular services, and other humanitarian measures helped to aid the families cope with the shock of loss and grief. The association quickly organized action groups to collaborate with government agencies to support the families. The association also arranged psychological support programs, writing workshops, and facilitated visa and consular services. In August 2021, the association organized a justice rally in Toronto in anticipation of the upcoming federal elections in Canada. Thousands of supporters gathered around Toronto City Hall in solidarity with the victims' families. By late September, when early elections took place in Canada, the association and its members were dismayed that Flight PS752 was never mentioned during the election campaigns. By mid-October, the association organized an information booth at the Frankfurt Book Fair in Germany as an effort to engage the international community. The spokesperson of the association traveled to Ukraine for direct talks with Ukrainian government officials. Various topics such as the RCMP's lack of proactive engagement and the domestic criminal proceedings were discussed. The newly appointed Canadian Minister of Foreign Affairs met with the association and the families. The association took that opportunity to brief the minister on their upcoming fact-finding report. November 20th, 2021 marked a major landmark in the history of the association. The Iranian government unilaterally commenced their domestic legal proceedings under a closed military tribunal by implicating 10 low-ranking unknown personnel to further their agenda of human and systematic error. The families and their legal representatives were denied access to the court files or any participation in the process. Distraught and devastated, the families in Iran courageously took to the streets to voice their protest and demand a fair and impartial judicial process that holds the real perpetrators of the crime accountable. Soon thereafter, the association held a press conference on November 24, 2021 to unveil their fact-finding report. The report was the result of close collaboration between the association's fact-finding committee and military, aviation, legal, investigative, and forensic experts. The association's fact-finding report highlighted the major shortcomings, new findings, and most importantly, emphasized the urgent need for a proper investigation by an independent international body to reveal the truth. Unfortunately, Canada's Transport Minister responded to the association's fact-finding report as merely an interpretation of the facts rather than acknowledging the merits of the report and his responsibility to address the shortcomings in Canada's dealing with the crime. The media, however, took a more nuanced approach to the association's fact-finding report. Today, as we embark on the second anniversary of the downing of Flight PS752, we face the same questions. Who ordered missiles to be shot at Flight PS752? Why and by whom was the Iranian airspace kept open during a historic direct military confrontation with the United States? What happened during those early morning hours of January 8? Why has the Iranian government failed to live up to its international obligations? Who was responsible in dispatching lethal air defense units and with what motivation? Why is the international community credulous, if not silent, in the face of such inhuman acts of violence? When will this cycle of violence be stopped? The families ask, how much longer will this painful wound over the skies of Tehran remain open?